Ladies and gentlemen, in this video, I'm going to be talking about the times that recruiting services got it right. I've been talking about some busts. Now I'm going to go over some players that were ranked properly. And of course, when it comes to recruiting, they are getting more and more accurate. A lot of these are more recently, beginning with the class of 2017. Chase Young and Jeff Okudah back-to-back. Chase Young ranked 7th overall. Okudah ranked 8th overall. It is funny because both of these guys went inside of the top 5 back-to-back. Chase Young went 2nd. Okudah went 3rd. And Chase Young was just a beast. I mean, honestly, Chase Young probably should have been like the number 1 or number 2 player in the country just based off of his build in high school. I mean, he was a man. And his junior year, I'm not saying he would have won the Heisman because that was Burrows, but if he would have played those 2 games, he might have had 10 forced fumbles. I mean, he had 7 forced fumbles in 12 games, 16 and a half sacks. He probably could have gotten to 20 if he would have played those 2 games. And in the NFL, it's been kind of an up and down experience for Chase Young. He did have a really good rookie season, was a Pro Bowler as a rookie, won Defensive Rookie of the Year. And then after that, he's dealt with some injuries. I'm guessing he'll sign a 1-year prove-it deal with someone, maybe the 49ers, to play with Nick Bosa, possibly be presented with one-on-one opportunities, and we'll see what he ends up doing. But he still is a decent NFL player, maybe not lived up to like the premier Myles Garrett, Nick Bosa, TJ Watt hype. And then moving on to Jeff Okudah. I'm surprised Jeff Okudah struggled in the NFL. You know, you could say, well, it's the Lions, but he was a beast in college, especially his junior year, lockdown corner. That Ohio State 29 defense was just ridiculous. But he did kind of have a little bit of a resurgence with the Falcons. Approximate value of a 3, that's not great. But in terms of his high school ranking, it was correct, ranking him inside of the top 10, and then he got drafted 3rd overall. That is a very high place to be drafted as a pure cornerback. Moving on to the next players they got right. Trevor Lawrence. So Trevor Lawrence listed as the number 1 overall player, kind of seen as a god prospect. He was the number 1 player throughout the entire cycle. Massive 6'6" quarterback from the South, commits to Clemson, and he ends up going 1st in the draft. And pretty much everyone knew his true freshman season, he was going to go 1st. Everybody knew it. And then Justin Fields listed as the number 2 overall quarterback from Georgia. Plays at Georgia sparingly 1 year and then transfers to Ohio State and obviously breaks out. And Justin Fields could have easily been the number 2 overall pick, but Zach Wilson and then also Trey Lance jumped him during the evaluation process. I think, obviously Fields is a better pro than both those quarterbacks, so theoretically, both of these guys were pretty much accurately ranked, especially Lawrence being number 1 overall, although it was kind of obvious. You can see Lawrence, he's one of those players, both of these players I'm surprised didn't win a Heisman, but then again, the Heisman is only given to one player every year. Him as a freshman, 30 touchdowns, 4 interceptions, really just having a consistent year at Clemson. His junior year, he did get hurt, and he only played 10 games. But, yeah, Trevor Lawrence was a stud in college. Also, Justin Fields, you can see, appeared in 12 games as a freshman with Georgia, but didn't start any of them. 4 touchdowns, 0 interceptions. Transfers to Ohio State, 41 touchdowns, 3 interceptions his sophomore year. And then his junior year, I remember he threw a couple of picks late that year to kind of warp his numbers a little bit. But overall, still a really good career. I believe he finished 1 year 2nd in terms of Heisman, or was it 3rd and 4th? 1 year was 3rd, the other year was 4th. But yeah, Justin Fields was a beast, and they got those 2 right. Another one, Micah Parsons. So Parsons ranked as the number 5 overall player. Kind of had an interesting recruitment. He originally committed to Penn State, decommitted. Everyone thought he was going to go to Ohio State. He ends up recommitting to Penn State. He appeared on College Game Day set, and people were speculating that that's the reason Ohio State couldn't recruit him, because they committed recruiting violations when they allowed him to go in Columbus on the game day set with Kirk Herbstreit. Kind of an interesting backstory. But Parsons, why did he actually fall to the number 12th pick? It just makes no sense. This dude is everything you want in a modern day hybrid NFL defensive end. The athleticism, the strength. You can see he did not play his junior year. He completely sat it out, just like Jamar Chase. As a sophomore, he had 14 tackles for loss, 5 sacks, but he was really coming on late in that season and thoroughly dominated against Memphis in their New Year's 6 games. Yeah, Micah Parsons was a beast, and you could see in the NFL. It's just ridiculous. I mean, he has an approximate value above the amount of games he's played, which is very rare for any player that's not a quarterback. So Parsons, I was looking at his stuff, 3 Pro Bowls in 3 seasons. He's really putting together an impressive resume early on. Moving on to the next one they got right. I think they got Amon-Ra St. Brown right. I mean, the evaluators of the NFL, I don't know what they were doing, letting him fall to the 4th round. I think that has to do with 2020 and just how weird it was. But yeah, he was the number 11 overall player, a surefire 5-star, the number 2 receiver, and the number 1 player in the state of California out of Anaheim. And he commits to USC before Lincoln Riley was even there. You can see his 3 years. I mean, they're pretty impressive. 750 yards as a true freshman, 1,000 yards, and then only in 6 games because of the weird schedules, because the Pac-12 didn't want to play with the pandemic. He still amassed almost 500 yards and had 7 touchdowns. So yeah, Amon-Ra St. Brown, and then you can see in 3 seasons in the NFL, he's averaging about 1,200 yards per year. He's a surefire number 1 receiver, and he should have been a first-round pick, and he was correctly ranked as a 5-star. The next players they got right, it is Kavon Tibido, who for a while was the number 1 overall player in the entire class. Now he dropped down to the number 2 player out of California. I thought he was going to go to USC. He ends up going to Oregon, and then Derek Stingley, the number 3 overall player out of Louisiana, gets drafted 3rd overall. Thibodeau went 5th overall, so that's 2 top 5 players that were ranked in high school going in the top 5 of the NFL draft. And Thibodeau, he just had a really solid college career. You look, the only year you could say his numbers kind of dipped was his sophomore year because he only played 7 games. But that's because of the whole pandemic thing. But 35.5 tackles for loss, 19 sacks in 3 seasons while he didn't fully play. That is very impressive numbers. And now with the Giants, I think he's turning into a pretty good pass rusher. His sophomore year, 11.5 sacks. You can't complain if you're the Giants. Derek Stingley's had a tough time with injuries. I'm surprised Derek Stingley went in front of Sauce Gardner. And I'm not just saying that as revisionist history. I was on record saying I think Sauce Gardner is by far the number 1 cornerback in that class. But moving on to the next player they got right, Bryce Young, the dual threat quarterback listed at 5'11", out of California, the number 2 player in the country, goes to Alabama and just has a really impressive career. Wins a Heisman as a sophomore, the 47 passing touchdowns. As a junior, maybe slightly worse, but still a really good year if you look at overall QB rating at 163. And obviously he did become the number 1 overall pick. So he was ranked number 2 in the country, and he was drafted 1st overall, and he has struggled for sure. But I just think that's something to where he's on a bad team. He's a rookie. He should be a decent quarterback. Obviously, they chose the wrong quarterback. They should have drafted C.J. Stroud number 1 overall. But that's not to say Bryce Young can't turn it around and still have a good NFL career. Moving on to the next player, how about Paris Johnson Jr., the big offensive tackle from Cincy, Ohio, ranked as the number 9 overall player, the number 1 offensive tackle in the country. He gets drafted 6th overall. So Paris Johnson Jr., and you can see as a rookie, he had an approximate value of an 8. So not a terrible start for Paris Johnson when it comes to the NFL. He should be a very solid offensive tackle for the Cardinals. And he was ranked very accurately coming out of high school. The next one, you could say Caleb Williams. I mean, honestly, he should have been ranked number 1. Let's just call it what it is, because he's going to be the number 1 overall pick from D.C. He was still a 5-star. He was still within the top 7. Commits to Oklahoma. We know the story. Lincoln Riley, he follows him to USC. He ends up winning a Heisman his sophomore year, kind of similar to Bryce Young winning his Heisman sophomore year, and then tails off slightly during his junior year, but he will be the number 1 overall pick. And then J.J. McCarthy. Interesting recruiting story with J.J. McCarthy. Actually, you want to know something? Caleb Williams was really considering LSU as well. I do remember that. Maybe I'll try and reminisce on some of these guys' recruitments. But the J.J. McCarthy thing, Ryan Day basically had a choice between J.J. McCarthy and Kyle McCord, and he picked McCord over McCarthy. And at first, McCarthy actually wanted to go to Notre Dame, but Notre Dame chose Tyler Buckner over McCarthy. And then McCarthy picked Michigan. And you can see they had McCarthy overall, the composite did ranked at number 25 now. I've heard things to where McCarthy might actually be like a top 10 pick, but I'm still expecting like mid first. So if he's like picked 15th or 16th, I mean, that's a really accurate to have him at number 25 overall. And you could see his numbers at Michigan. You know, you could say they're pedestrian. It is good in terms of efficiency. When you look at 49 touchdowns, just 11 interceptions, he can also run a little bit. I'm expecting him to be a mid-first round pick. And then going back a little bit, Derrick Henry. So Derrick Henry was ranked as an athlete out of Florida, the number 12 overall player, commits to Alabama, and he was just a hoss as a junior. I mean, he was the final boss. 28 touchdowns, rushing touchdowns. Well, I guess he did have 0 receiving touchdowns, but he won the Heisman, over 2,000 rushing yards. And then obviously he's had a very impressive pro career. He did go in the second round just because running backs are devalued and Henry had very little pass catching ability, so he was seen as one-dimensional. And that's kind of why he fell to the second round of the Titans. But he should have been a first-round pick. I mean, based off these numbers, even if you want to say the running back position is devalued, still, these numbers are worthy of at least like the 20th or the 21st overall pick. But either way, guys, those are just some players that were accurately ranked by the recruiting services. That's going to do it for this video. Make sure you follow me on X. Link to that's always in the description.